everyone, I'm Amy, this is my wife Maggie,
Hello.
and together we are ThinkerThemer. This is a very special episode. We have just returned from Taiwan.
Yes.
And we spent almost 10 days over Easter kicking around Taipei City, playing in arcades, eating lots of delicious food.
Such amazing food, drinking lots of bubble tea.
Yes, and finding lots of board game stores, because if you don't know this about Taiwan, they've actually had quite a... What would you call it? A boom of board games. There are board game shops everywhere.
Yeah.
There's lots of
lots of board game cafes.
Lots
as
of
well.
cafes with great libraries where people, especially on the weekend, go to play games, and it was really nice to see. And of course, a lot of the games are in Mandarin. And so, you know, neither of us can speak Mandarin, and so that was a little bit challenging. But through all of the games, we did find some that either had an English rulebook or we were familiar with them before.
Yeah, or we're not language dependent, so it didn't really matter if, like what language it was on.
Yeah, and so we were
essential.
we weren't expecting to, but we came home with a little bit of a haul. Classic us.
Yeah.
Some of the haul is of course some plushies that we won in all of our arcading. They're also going through quite a claw machine.
Yes, over the last couple of years, there's been a boom in claw machines. But a bit of a disclaimer: they're
so
fairly rigged.
If you think, you know, the ones in Australia or America or Europe are rigged, these are really, really rigged. Lots of little tricks,
dodgy, questionable things that they do to prevent it, like from going one direction, or like, you know, the classic, it cannot grip, but then
on
the
a slight
location.
Angle.
Yeah, the angle. I'd never seen that before. So when it picks them up, not only does it just drop them, it flings them further away from the hole. It's like, I'd never seen that. I didn't even know that it could do that.
So that was pretty hilarious.
Yeah.
It didn't really stop us playing. We still played at a lot of arcades, and you can see we still won a few little plushies to bring home with us. But for the most part, we were looking for board games, and we got to actually play some games while we were there, because we were traveling with my sister. So we had 3 of us. So that meant that at night we could kind of relax with a board game.
Yeah.
So we've made a list for you. We've ranked them.
Yeah.
And so we're going to talk through all of the games that we bought and played from Taiwan. So let's get into it with our number 13. So our number 13 game that we played
quite
and
a big one, and
purchased.
very inconvenient to travel with. Like, a good one to pick up overseas.
It is called.
We're gonna have to make room, make way.
Move out the way, plushies. It's called Bamboleo, and this is not a Taiwanese game. This is a European game, and it's from the same series, if you've seen the dexterity game, Hamster Roll, which is a game that we do have in our collection, that we haven't really spoken about, but absolutely adore. It's a game with a big wheel where you're adding wooden pieces to that wheel, and the wheel actually moves, and basically you're trying to get all of your pieces onto that wheel and not have them fall off.
That's not this game.
That is not this game. But it does explain why I saw this game and immediately was like, we must buy that game, because I'd never seen it in the Australian
I'd never seen
game
this
stores.
Game before,
And so this, you know, I recognized the box immediately because it's the same kind of series as Hamster Roll. It's called Bamboleo. And it's meant to represent...
It's very Spanish colors, and I think the
dances.
I think it's meant to be represent flamenco dancing, maybe.
But it's very
because
abstract.
It's so whoa. But that's not really what flamenco's like, so I'm not quite sure.
And as you can see from the box art, it sits on this wooden column, and then you've got this large yellow disc, and then all of the pieces get randomly put onto this disc, and they're balancing in the air, and on a player's turn, their job is to remove one of the pieces without making the whole thing collapse. Now, what was interesting about this game is actually one of the hardest things was setting up the game.
Yeah, the setup. They're like, just set everything up on the wooden thing and then just put it on top. It's fairly straightforward. It's like, well, no, because you still are having to find just the sweet spot. Yeah,
you've got to find the balance spot first before you can even get started. And so you were shifting the pieces around, putting it on, and it's not staying stable. So that was pretty hilarious. So
it's a cooperative game.
Cooperative setup.
During the setup. And then it only really took a couple of turns before it just... comes crumbling down.
That's why this game is ranked last on our list, because even though it looks really cool, and I can see like a lot of people having this on the table and, you know, at a con or something and people coming around, but the game is over so quickly because it is so sensitive to moving those pieces around. So it's a game where, unlike other dexterity games, where you can kind of be a little bit, if you're feeling like risky, maybe you might take a piece and maybe a couple of pieces drop off and you gain those pieces. This one, if you're feeling risky, you're destroying the whole game for everybody else.
Even if you're not feeling risky, it's so like tentatively balanced. And the other thing is, obviously, you're very dependent on the surface that you're playing. So if you're playing any kind of, like, for example, a felt surface, that's not going to work because the
or if someone bumps the table,
the
whole thing is just going to collapse.
Too precarious.
But but I feel like this game is one for very serious dexterity players, where you're willing to be patient and really be careful with picking those pieces. But for us, a dexterity game should be like fast and fun, because we don't want to spend all of our gaming time playing a dexterity game. So,
or setting it up.
This one is like we're setting it up and then 2 seconds later it's being destroyed. A bit lower on our ranking. So that's Bamboleo.
And the next one is, which is our, so are we going to reveal how many we're going to be covering?
Well, it's our number 12, so we've already said number 13.
Oh, okay. I zoned out for a moment there. So,
it's early in the morning and we just got off a flight, basically. So number 12 is Kobayakawa. And this is a little game that, in fact, was given to us with the purchase of another game. So we weren't intending to buy this game, but it's a little card game that, from the sound of it, it sounds Japanese. And also the author or the designer sounds Japanese as well. But it's a little card game that has essentially numbers on all of the cards, and it's really simple in what you're doing. On your turn, you've got cards in your hand. I think you start with 2 and then you end up with 1. And what you're trying to do is you're either picking up a card from the deck and exchanging the card that you have.
Putting a card down. So picking up from the deck and then choosing from the 2 that you have to then eventually place 1 down, which is going to be like your battle card.
Yeah, so you're exchanging it for the card that you've picked up. That's exactly what I said.
No, because you're not putting it down. There's also...
not on the deck. Not on the deck. So you're just discarding it.
Yeah.
Or you can actually change the card that's face up in the middle with the next card on the deck. So you're either manipulating the final card that's going to come into play, or you're exchanging the card that you're going to play down.
Yeah.
And once everybody has had a turn at doing that, we're going to all play our cards down at the same time. And what's interesting is the highest card or the highest number is going to win, but the lowest card gets to add the value of the card that's face up in the center.
Yeah.
And so you're trying to work out whether you want to hold on to a really high card like 14 and be like, I think this can beat what everyone else is going to have. Or you want a really low card that's going to be added to the center card.
Yeah.
That's the whole game.
Yeah, that's the game. And then you're choosing whether or not to battle. And so if you do choose to battle, you're bidding 1 chip. And then you're winning every chip that was bid that round. But you're allowed to pass.
As well as a bonus chip.
As well as a bonus chip from the middle. That's essentially the game.
That is
and
essentially
you just kind of keep
the
going
game.
until the chips are all finished. And then whoever has the most chips wins.
I really like the mechanic of adding the lowest number. Adding to the lowest number. I thought that was really clever. And actually, this game was probably more fun than its BGG rating would suggest. I believe it was like kind of in the 6s. And we were like, oh, we got this game for free. It's not going to be very good. But we had like quite a bit of fun with it. So a cute little game, but
it's a cute little battle game. Good filler.
Very quick.
Filler.
Very quick. So that's Kobayakawa.
All right. So the next one is... this one, it's a bit buried. One moment, please. And it's got 2 different titles because it's got like the title on the box that is really convoluted.
Please read the title on the box.
The title on the box is, you can't even see, so it's Taiwan's most beautiful scenery transformer box, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But then the BGG listing is transformer boxes, Taiwan's most beautiful scenery.
Still a mouthful.
Still quite a mouthful.
Probably they could have shortened it down.
But
a hilarious
in essence,
theme.
Yeah.
It's a hilarious theme.
hilarious is
hilarious.
A strong word. It's about
hilarious when you've had very little sleep.
It's about electricity transformer boxes.
It's about the transformer boxes that are placed all around the city,
yeah.
and how they try and make them fold in with the scenery.
Yeah.
So it's about delivering electricity around Taipei and Taiwan, essentially. And all these little all the cards have illustrations of the transformer boxes in the context of different landmarks,
different
around
locations and sites and things like that.
Very cute.
But essentially, the game itself is it's a combination of bidding. So you're going to be setting up this set of cards, and then one player is going to get to decide. We kind of see them all, and then we put them face down, and then one player is going to get to decide the grouping. So you kind of pile them up into the number of piles based on the number of players. But that's face down. And so then it becomes a bit of a blind-ish kind of bidding. There are some certain powers where some people might be able to sneak peek at what's behind there. And we all get to reveal at least one. So you would get to kind of potentially know from one pile, one or a couple of the cards that are there. So the first stage is that sort of bidding, and then the next stage is you're actually acquiring those cards and doing a bit of a tableau building, and sometimes there's a bit of a set collection. So some of the cards are about combination, like the tourist sightings, I believe, they're the set collection sort of component, and then there's others that more interact with one another, of if you manage to get two of these, or if you manage to get this plus this other card, then you're going to get points. Or you get to have additional kind of powers. That's essentially the game, I would say.
Yeah, it is. It's very much like Sushi Go with a bidding element, because the cards are very similar in that some of them are going to, some of them is an immediate win. If you get 4 of one type, I think it is, it's going to immediately end the game. Some of them require pairs of different cards, so you can kind of get a sense of what the players around the table are going to be bidding on. But a very simple bidding mechanic. I thought it was interesting. I felt like the most interesting thing about this game is if you have been to Taiwan, all of the illustrations on the cards represent actual locations. And so that was really cool, because we played this towards the end of our trip, and we were looking at them and we're like, oh, we went there, and we went there, and we went there.
I'll be like, oh, what's this? We didn't go here. What is it? Look it up.
But a lot of them we had been to, and it's beautifully illustrated.
Yeah, it's really nice artwork.
It's a really nice artwork. But this one would be buy it if you've been to Taiwan and you have the memories associated with the theme.
For me, it's more like a travel memento than it is seek out this game.
Yeah, I don't even know if it'd be easy to find, because I found this buried in one of the board game stores. So that is Taiwan's most beautiful scenery transformer box.
And now we move on to
number 10.
Yes.
Our number 10 is a game called Geometric Art. Now, I know that there's a couple of games that have a similar mechanic, but in this game, it is essentially a Pictionary style game where you are drawing out you've got a topic and you've got to draw something, and then the other players around the table are going to have to guess what that something is within the category. However, in this game, you're going to be rolling a set of dice that are going to give you particular shapes, geometric shapes that you have to use to create your art piece, and you cannot use additional lines. You cannot color things in unless it says you're able to. You have to use specifically the dice and the number of dice that are shown on a card. So we're flipping a card that's going to give us the colored category that we're going to refer to on the reference sheet, and it's going to tell us how many of the dice we get to use. So even though we're rolling lots of dice, it might say 4 on it. So you've got to choose, I guess I want the squiggly line and one circle and one triangle and maybe a straight line.
Yeah.
And then from that, you have to somehow communicate.
You're really limited.
You're really limited. And we were playing this, and my fondest memory of this is just Maggie convincing my sister and I that this is so obvious, and all it was just a circle and 2 triangles and a squiggle, and she's like, it's so obvious, and we're like, this is not obvious. This is not. And then when she revealed what it was, we were like, that is not obvious.
I
still not obvious.
I wish I had taken a photo so that I could show
not obvious
and see how obvious it was.
But Maggie is notoriously
Maggie
is good at many things, and drawing is not one.
I am a terrible drawer, even when I'm trying to do stick figures. So this is a game that I do not have any kind of advantage with.
But, you know, we actually don't have a lot of drawing games in our collection. Not a huge fan of them. But this one was quite a lot of fun, and I could see our friends really enjoying this. So this rolling and drawing game, Geometric Art, is our number 10.
All right. Number 9 is actually just underneath it.
Why are they all on my side?
I don't know.
Number
it just happened that
9 is a Taiwanese designed game that came out recently. I think it came out last year.
I think it was,
Called Pathogen. Would you like to talk about Pathogen?
Well, I'll try. So in Pathogen, it's interesting because it's an abstract game, but the theme overlay on it is you're either playing as the doctors and the kind of angel side, or you're playing as the pathogen and the demons side. And so you've got this, so it's a 2-player game, head-to-head type game, chess-ish like. You've got a variable board setup that has different grids, so black and white sort of grids, and they become the paths. So you have your main meeple, that is either the pathogen meeple or the doctor meeple, and they can only move in the light, which are the white blocks, which represent the daytime, or the light. Yeah, because I think the demon and the angel move in the dark pathways, which represent the it's not really the night, but it's kind of like the darker kind of world.
And so really struggling with the theme. It's very abstract.
Yeah, but then so essentially it's all about kind of movement and dropping off your presence. So you've got these other little tokens where every place that once you move, you're kind of going to be leaving tokens along your path. And ultimately it's going to be about either connecting two opposite ends of the board, or building these settlements, which are built based on, I think from memory, it's like 5. If you manage to stack 5 of your 5 or 6 of your tokens in the same block, you build a settlement. So if you manage to build a settlement in each one of the 4 quadrants or 4 corners, that also triggers endgame. So, but the interesting thing about it is the movement, because the way the movement works is you've got this side little board that is the movement board, that you have a token representing one side and a token representing the other, and usually you'll have a little movement additional kind of token on top of, say, for example, Amy's token. And so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to decide to move my position, my token, so that the movement between Amy's token and mine will be the same movement that I'm going to recreate on the board with either of my token pieces. But the other thing that makes it really kind of bizarre is because the tokens, like my Dr. Meeple, for example, can only move in the white blocks, it's going to skip all of the black spots. Yeah. So there's that additional kind of spatial...
So if it moves 2 steps to the right, it's only going to move 2 steps to the right on the white path.
Yeah.
And it's going to skip the black ones, which means that it's not an exact representation of the path that you're drawing on the little sideboard where you're planning out your path.
Yeah.
And so it takes a little while for your brain to kind of merge those 2 things together.
Yes.
It was a bit confusing for me at the beginning, but once I got into it, it is a really interesting puzzle, because that also makes it harder for your opponent, I think, as well, to see how obvious your next win move is. And I think that is a really key element in this game. So if I'm looking at how Maggie can win by creating a path, it's much harder for me to focus on that unless I'm staring at that little board and working out how many steps she has to take. But so often you are thinking about your own turn that maybe you'll miss that, as I did, and Maggie beat me in our first game. But Pathogen, it's
so rare, so I have to,
especially in an abstract game. But if you like a game like Shobu, it's interesting in that it has that same kind of, you're moving something in one space to affect another board in another area. But this one is much more complex because you have 2 moving meeples that are moving around either on the light or the dark. and you've got your opponent there's multiple objectives that they could be going after as well. And so it is quite thinky.
And also, there's slight differences in the way that the movement allowance for the two different characters, for the two roles, because one of them is really restricted.
You have more movement available.
You have more movement, but if you're playing as the Doctor, for example, you are restricted to a smaller circle or a smaller area, but you can turn that board, so the movement board, so you can turn it 90, 180, I think, or 270 degrees.
Oh, super confusing.
So there's a lot.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah, for an abstract game.
And to be honest, I'm really impressed by this design. It is if you like abstract games, it's fantastic. It's very chess-like. I feel as though, we had to create our ranking together, our combined ranking, and if it was up to me, this would be higher up, but for Maggie, this is very much lower down.
Just because of its abstract nature, and I don't tend to resonate as much with abstract
It kind of landed somewhere in the middle, but that is a Pathogen one to look out for if you're shopping in Taiwan.
All right, so what's next? Our number 8 is this one. So this one, I believe did we cover it? We talk about it in one of our back chat ones.
I don't think so, but it's definitely a game or a series that everyone would recognize.
Yeah.
So
Walking in Provence.
Yeah. It's the newest in the series.
Yeah, so it's all about walking along, taking photographs. It's not just walking, because you're also taking photographs with a drone. I guess you kind of have to be walking around to move the drone.
Can I just say, it is a Taiwanese designer of this series, which I didn't actually know until we noticed them all in the shops everywhere.
Yeah. And so this one is, so the whole thing is you've got these different objectives of things that you're wanting to photograph. And it's that sort of the race objective of, the first person who gets there is going to get to claim the most points for that particular configuration. And so what you're doing is you're going to be laying different tiles or cards on your little kind of area to create some of those configurations. So some of them can be the lavender fields, some of them could be buildings, some of them, I think it's like one of them is a church, I think is meant to represent. And so when on your turn, you're kind of building to your little area,
and you can layer them on top of each other. So you're trying to create that kind of card melding situation.
Correct. And then you're going to decide if you're able to take a photograph. And you've got two types of photographs that you can take. One is just like regular photograph, which is going to be this kind of long, elongated, and you've got this translucent, what do you call that? Like perspex type sheet that then shows you what's the area that's in your sight, your line of sight, and that's where you need to have the combination of items to meet that particular goal. The other option is you've got a drone photograph. So you've also got a drone meeple. So you got you walking meeple and a drone meeple, and the drone has a different perspex. So it's more of it's like a broader area. Yeah. It's square, and it kind of captures a different kind of section. So it's really a combination of kind of going, how many of these can we do over? I think it's like 8 rounds.
What's really interesting though is that the meeples that you have can only stand on specific spots that are on the cards as well. So you're creating this little puzzle. You're trying to include all the items that are on the objective cards, but then you also have to position the meeple such that, it has that range of view. Yeah. And so I really liked that. I also really liked the fact that they were all race objectives, so the first person to do it gets more points. So I always love that in games. But I did find the game itself a little bit fiddly with the perspex. It is a bit. If you can work out that
I don't mind fiddly, so I wasn't just what do you call it?
You love
annoyed by that component at all.
You also don't need the perspex. So if you can remember, it's a 5x5 grid. It just makes it a lot easier to just double check, especially to check other people's puzzle and be like, did you actually get that objective? And then you put it on top and you're like, okay, you got that. The other interesting element about it mechanically is that you're going to pass the leftover landscape card to the person next to you. And so the card that I'm going to have, one of the cards I'm going to have available is always going to be one that, Maggie is discarding. And that's interesting too, because if you know someone is getting close to a particular objective, you can make sure you don't hand them the right card. No. So that's another little competitive element to it. And that is Walking in Provence, which is our number 8.
Our number 8. Now,
8.
the number 7 is buried because I did not plan this very well. So let me just, one moment,
While
please.
Maggie's getting it, I will start to talk about it. This is a game that is coming to Kickstarter. Now, why do we already have this game? We did not purchase this game.
No.
We actually got an opportunity to meet with a publisher. We met with David from Mo Ideas Publishing, which is a company that was responsible for a game that was recently on Kickstarter, quite a big Euro called Jianen, which has an interesting action selection mechanism, I believe. Also, the little rail game called Mini Express, as well as a number of other games. But this is their new game that's coming to Kickstarter, I believe, at the end of this month, so really soon.
Yeah.
And he gave us a copy, which is really lovely, called Etariya. And this game is a new universe that they've created, which is going to have a similar theme across a number of games. However, this game is extremely abstract.
Very abstract.
Very, very, very abstract. And they have created this world. And I will note that the box art is changing.
Yes.
And, we had a couple of discussions about, the scantily clad female on the front.
For an extremely abstract game.
Extremely abstract. It feels a little bit unnecessary. But let's talk about the game, because the game itself is really interesting. It's super fast. This game plays in about 10 to 15 minutes. And what you're going to be doing is you're going to be, it's only 2-player, and you're going to be placing out these coloured tokens onto a board that is modular. So at the beginning of the game, you're going to set up the board using these Perspex sheets that create a pattern of light and dark grid-like pattern, like a chessboard, but with different patterns.
Yeah.
And each player is either going to represent the light or the dark, as usual. But what you're going to be doing is you're going to be placing colours, different coloured tokens, and the colours of the tokens belong to neither player. In fact, when you place, for example, a purple piece down onto the grid, you have to place it adjacent to another purple piece. So the first one gets to go anywhere, but then after that you
Except for the corners for some
Except
reason.
for the corners, because...
I'm sure there's some kind of advantage reason.
Yeah, there is, because if you put them in the corner, it's very easily
limited
blocked in for the next person to place a purple. But if you're placing them down, you have to place them adjacent, but what you're trying to do is place them on top of your coloured base colour, so light or dark, because the first player to get 4 of each coloured piece on top of, for me, if I was playing as the dark black color, then having 4 on black is going to win me an advantage in that color, and I'm going to take a token to say that I have that advantage. It cannot be taken off me because all the pieces are going to stay on the board. And so Maggie has lost purple, and now we're competing over the rest of the colors, and the first person to have an advantage in 4 colors wins. And so in this game, what's happening is you are going to have 3 tokens at any one time. So I might have a purple, red, and a green, and on my turn I have to place out all 3 of those. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to make sure that in every grouping of color, you still have opportunity to place on your own color, because you don't want to be stuck with the option to only have to place it on your opponent's color. That is a bad scene. And what you're also trying to do is you're trying to box in your opponent in a color too, so that they're going to have to place on your color. And so there's a few interesting dynamics, but because you're playing with multiple colors across multiple spots on the board, there's quite a bit to think about. Like if I block myself for purple here, but it's going to open up my gray, is that a good move? And then what you do is once you've played the 3, you draw out of the bag. In the original base rules, you draw another 3 out of the bag. When we played it that way, it felt a little bit too random.
It's very, it feels a lot more luck dependent, because it's like you have no idea what you're going to get, and then you kind of have to make do with what you've got. But so not a lot of forward planning allowance.
But I believe then they have anticipated that, and so that's the simplest version of the game. And then they've included 2 additional rule sets for drafting. And one of the rule sets I really enjoyed, which is that at any one time there are 3 sets of 3 to draft from in order to refill your hand, and that gives you options, so you don't end up just having to deal with the random things you're drawing out of the bag. But it also allows you to think about, if I don't take that set, then my opponent's going to take that next, and they're going to win 2 different colors. So I'm going to have to take that, otherwise they're going to win. So it adds a layer of strategy that I really, really enjoyed.
Yeah.
And at that point, we really started to like this game, and it was so fast that we just played it over and over again.
Very, very quickly. It doesn't take up a lot of room, which is another really handy thing. So we were able to play it even like at the airport in like small tables and things like that.
Yeah.
I actually really like another variant of it, which is you have all of the tokens displayed around sort of like in a circle or semicircle around the board, and you're only ever able to select your 3 from either end. So, and they have to be in a row, because then that means that you've got all information is shown in terms of the possible sequence of colors that you're going to be able to get. So I enjoy that there's all those different variations in terms of how you can tackle it.
A really, really fast playing abstract. If you're into abstracts, again, Maggie's not as into abstracts, so that always
even I kind of enjoyed this one because it plays so quickly, and it's just, and I think I actually really like the feel of those wooden tokens as well, and the colors. So,
but super easy to teach as well. So check this out on Kickstarter towards the end of April. That is Etariya.
No idea how you pronounce it.
Etariya.
All right, so the next
6
one is one that is going to be more familiar to people, because it's just really
a reskin.
A reskin of a well-known game. So this is Patchwork, the Formosa edition.
Can I talk about this? Because I also know about the game, not the game. Most people are going to be aware of the game. The Formosa or Taiwanese edition. So Patchwork has a number of special editions that are themed as using different countries' textiles, and I have wanted the Taiwanese version for so long. In fact, I tried to order it from Australia and I couldn't find anywhere to order it from. I've looked for it in the US, I couldn't find it there, and so I was so happy to see this on shelves in Taiwan, and of course purchased it immediately. And we don't actually own the regular Patchwork.
No, we don't actually have a copy of Patchwork
until now. Of course, we've played Patchwork, but we had never owned it, and I had my eye on this edition. It is beautiful because it uses all of the indigenous kind of textiles from Taiwan, and so it has these beautiful patterns on it. So I really, really appreciate and like a special edition. Sorry, carry on.
That's all right. So I'll talk a little bit about the game. So the game, a lot of people are familiar with it, but essentially
no difference in the gameplay.
No, it's the exact same gameplay. So you are collecting these different polyomino or kind of different shapes that you're going to be putting onto your own little board. And so there's a couple of things that you're trying to do. One, you're trying to cover as much of that board as possible, because you're going to have negative points for every space that you don't manage to collect. So you kind of want to go for bigger pieces. But then at the same time, you're going to be getting, the way to get those pieces, you have to purchase them. The currency is buttons. And so some of the pieces that you purchase along the way have buttons on them, which means every time your tracker goes through a button income phase, then you're going to get buttons for every button represented on your board. So there's a balance between, do I go for a piece that is going to help me get a lot of coverage? Can I afford it? Or do I go for a piece that maybe it's not as helpful coverage-wise, but it has more buttons? So there's that sort of tension.
The other element is the time element. So every piece that you are drafting to put onto your board has a little sand timer on it that and it has a number against it. That's going to be the number of steps that your marker moves around the kind of board, the board that triggers the end game. But the cool thing is that while you're behind on that board, you get to continue drafting pieces. And so you also want to draft pieces that keeps you behind, potentially, your opponent, because then you get to keep playing and taking more and more pieces to put onto your thing. And so you're also weighing out that. So does it give me income? Is it the right shape that I need? How much does it cost, and do I have enough buttons? And how much time is it adding? And is that going to put me ahead of my respondent?
Is it available to get? Because
I just called you my respondent, but I meant my...
You're already in work mode. We need to go to work. Because there's also a restriction in terms of which pieces you can select. You can't just select from all the pieces available. You can only select 3 pieces ahead of where the little kind of current token marker is. So you've got that added limitation.
So most people will be familiar with Patchwork.
Yeah.
This is really cute. If you are in Taiwan, seek out the Taiwanese edition of Patchwork.
Yes.
Very, very cool.
All right. Next one.
Number 5.
So to our top 5.
Up to our top 5. So this is number 5.
Dice fishing roll, and catch.
This is a game that I have coveted. It is a game that I believe you can only get in Taiwan, and it is about fishing. And so if you watch the channel, you'll know that I love fishing, and I really like fishing-themed games as well, even though we don't own that many of them.
We don't actually own that many.
No.
Yeah.
But Dice Fishing Roll and Catch is a game where you are rolling dice that represent your fishing rods. But what's interesting about this game is that you're kind of using your dice in a game of luck. And if you think about, most gamer preferences, we tend to not enjoy a lot of luck in our games. We are Euro gamers, and that, usually means luck is not high on our list of favorite things. But in this game, it's really fun. You are flipping over from the deck in the center a fish card, and this is the fish that everybody is going to try to catch. But you have a secret player screen in which you are going to place a number of dice from your hand. Most of the dice are D6s, but then you also have, I believe, a D9 and a D12. And you're going to be choosing to put as many or as few of those dice behind the player screen. The trick is the card or the fish has a number that you're going to have to hit in order to catch it. So it might
like the real value.
Yeah,
reeling value.
It might have a 9 on it, but then it also might have a condition. So 2 of the dice must be identical. So you're weighing up what is the fewest amount of dice that I can use in order to try to catch this fish? Because when we reveal behind our player screens, the player who bet the lowest number of dice is going to go first and try to catch the fish. And so if I said, I can do that in 4, so I've only put 4 dice there and everyone else put more, I get to roll my dice and hope that I can catch this fish with the fewest number of dice.
Yeah.
If I don't, then the person with the next fewest amount of dice gets to go for the fish. There's a little bit of a twist as well. When you use the D9 or the D12, I believe.
I'm probably going to have to put little asterisks on my screen.
So I'll stop saying it out loud.
We're not dice people.
When you play one of the special fishing rods, you either get to use it for its value. So if you had a high value that you were trying to hit and go above, get at least that or above, you might use it for its value. Or you can use it for its re-roll ability. So when you roll one of these special dice, depending on whether you get an odd or an even number, it allows you to either re-roll all of your other dice once or twice. And so that could help you, hit that value and win that fish. At the end of the game, all the fish that you've caught are worth a certain hook value, which is the victory points, and the person with the most victory points wins once we've run out of the deck in the center. At first, when I read about this game, I was like, I want to get it because of its theme. I know I'm not a themer, but I do like fishing games. I love the illustrations of the fish in here. For some reason, it just really appeals.
They're like hand-drawn illustrations, sketch style.
Yeah.
So it's like black and white.
Really cool looking game. But then I was like, I don't think we're going to enjoy the mechanic. But it was actually really fun.
It was really fun.
Fun.
How I feel about fun games, but this was actually quite
because there's that risk and reward, and then the luck is just part of the fun because you're like, I reckon I can do it in 3 dice, and I really want that fish. And then
it plays pretty quickly as well. Like it played pretty quickly. It's very, very simple, so it's a perfect game as a quick filler, as a little kind of mini semi-energizer.
I really liked it. I probably will bring this to cons and things to play because it's just a really simple, fun little game. And you know what? There is luck in fishing. There's a lot of luck in fishing. So it's kind of true to the theme. And that is Dice Fishing Roll and Catch. Now, number 4. Number 4 is a game that I would have ranked higher.
If it wasn't for me.
Probably, because this game just made me laugh so much. It is a reskinned game. I can't remember the name of the older game.
It's called Voodoo something. It's Marshmallow Test.
Marshmallow Test, and it's a Reina Knizia game. So most people will be familiar with that designer. I hope you are. But Marshmallow Test is a trick-taking game. Now, this game, I'm not sure if it's only restricted to Asian markets, but I think it's like a new reskin. So maybe this will pop up in other places, but we saw a lot of it in Taiwan.
And I hadn't seen it here either.
And I hadn't seen it in Australia yet. But Marshmallow Test is a trick-taking game in which you are trying to push your luck. So the very simple way that this game works is that everybody is going to be playing a card out of their hand into a trick, And it works in a very familiar style.
Yeah.
So the highest card in the lead suit will win the trick unless it's the trump card, and in which case the trump will win, the highest trump will win. So very, very baseline trick-taking rules. However, when you have 4 tricks, you are out of the game. So you come out of the round.
You cash in your marshmallows.
Yes.
So you get to eat all of your marshmallows.
Yeah. So, but at the point of which you go out, so when you win that 4th trick, you are going to get points according to the 4 tricks that you've won, plus every other trick that's been won around the table. So I'd get my 4, plus maybe Maggie has won 1, and maybe my sister's won 2, in which case I would get 7 points. So the interesting thing about this game is the timing of which you win your 4th trick, because you want other players to have built up enough tricks but not have got their 4th trick, because there's a really interesting dynamic when it gets down to the last 2 players, because the last player to hit 4 wins is not going to get any points. Yeah. So if you are last and everybody else has gone out by winning 4 tricks, you get 0 marshmallows, and marshmallows are the currency. Also, marshmallows are the victory points in the game.
It's like first to 20. It's one of those first to 20 marshmallows wins.
Yeah, but it's just a really amusing concept, because ideally in a 3-player game, you go out second, because the first player's already got 4 tricks, so you've got a banked 4 points, plus you're going to get the 4 from yourself, so that's 8 points, plus whatever the loser player, who is not going to get any points, has also won in tricks. So it's very interesting.
It's a funny dynamic, because it's like at the start you're like, oh, I don't want to win them. I want everyone else to start winning them. But then
all of a sudden you're like, 3 tricks. You're like, oh no, I can't catch up.
It's like I can't catch. Yeah, so and it's all based on the marshmallow test, that sort of psychological experiment where they've got kids to the delay gratification. So you can have 1 marshmallow now, and I think it's like, or wait, and then you'll be able to have 2
and then
later.
They leave them by themselves, and they're staring at the marshmallow.
Yeah, I don't know if they're
plenty of YouTube videos on that if you look up the marshmallow test. But I think it's like, well, what makes me love this game
I really enjoy this game
because
I'm laughing and you're like, ah!
I love a game that takes something familiar and just adds like a slight twist on it that just makes it's really simple, easy to get into, but then there's this fun social dynamic where you're kind of eyeing everybody off, wondering if they're going to all of a sudden make a run of like winning tricks. We love trick taking as well. So I don't know, I really enjoyed Marshmallow Test. Again, it would probably be higher in the rankings for me.
For you,
but we had to negotiate on this list.
We did. We had to compromise and agree.
A really cute one. Also, the marshmallows, the victory points, are squishy. They're squishy little marshmallows. So if this game couldn't get any higher on my estimation, it does because of the squishy marshmallows. So that is Marshmallow Test number 4.
And now we go to your side. Oh no, they're
number
buried
3,
now.
They are buried. I've been placing games on top of games. So number 3 is another game that I had on my to-buy list while in Taiwan. This is a Taiwanese game called Electropolis. Electropolis.
Yeah.
And this game is so apparently in Taiwan there's a bit of a fascination with electricity because there's a few electricity
at least in board gaming.
Yeah, in board gaming. But Electropolis is a game where if it's kind of in the style of like a quadropolis, where you are playing down tiles, and those tiles and their adjacencies are going to score you points. But the coolest thing about this game is really the action selection system, or the tile selection system, the player order, I should say, because there is a card in the middle of a circle of tiles. So every round we are going to place out a circle of tiles. These are the available tiles that we are possibly going to draft from. Then each player in this interesting turn order is going to select how many tiles they're going to take. So they might take anywhere from 2 to 6, I believe. And that's going to dictate the order in which you take those tiles. So if I select I'm only going to take 2 tiles, then I get to go first. But if I select 6, then I'm going to go last.
Yeah, you might get left with the dregs.
You might get left with the dregs of tiles that nobody wants. Yeah. And so it's an interesting choice right from the beginning, is do I want fewer tiles to go earlier or more tiles to go later? And then you also have to draft them from the circle of tiles. They need to all be adjacent to each other. order. So you need to take a connected set of tiles. And so if people are taking the tiles in between, the circle gets reconnected, and you've got a different set to draw from, essentially. And so that's the first decision. And then once we've worked that out, then we play it out in turn order. So I'm going to grab 3 tiles, Maggie might grab 4 tiles, and we are going to place them down onto the grid or our city that is going to be producing electricity, but you're putting down power plants of different types that need different types of resources.
Yeah, fuel.
So different types of fuel.
Yeah.
And so
you're
coal,
or they might need a nuclear kind of whatever you call it.
Cool. We don't understand electricity,
electricity or power.
But basically, you need to fuel the buildings that you're building. And so some of the tiles also represent the raw resources that are going to be pumped into your buildings in order to create electricity, but they don't go on your board, they get put to the side. But basically, if you're drafting a building of a particular type of a power plant of a particular type, then you need to also have the correct resources in order to fuel that building. And these buildings all produce pollution. So there is an educational little element to this game that you are trying to also offset all of the pollution that you're producing on your board by also giving back to the public. So you are, yes, I've definitely created all these greenhouse gases, but I also built a library.
I gave you a park. I gave you this. So you get these like little thumbs up of approval.
So you get these, public support. There's a board, a tracker for both pollution and public support. And at the end of the game, what's really interesting is you want them to offset each other. So you want the people to love you in equal proportions.
But they'll forgive all
all the sins of polluting. And what's interesting is that at the end of the game, the penalty you get if those are out of sync is you get the square of the difference between them. And what was hilarious in one of these games is that my sister had a difference of 9, and she thought that the penalty was the square root of the difference. So she's like 9, so 3. I was like, oh, no. It's 9 times 9.
Yeah. So it's like, you can't be rewarded because the pollution track maxes out. I'm like, well, you can't be rewarded where there's like, since she went over.
She copped a negative 81.
Because she went over the pollution. And then she had enough support, but the support track also maxes out. Yes. And they don't max out at the same point. So it's like you can never, match those two.
Yeah, so she created way too much pollution. But also there's interesting tiles that you can use to minimize the pollution on your board as well. And so there's lots of things to think about when you're drafting. But the most interesting thing, I think, in this game is that turn order selection. Because also, if you go... I got excited, I choked. If you go earlier in the turn order, for example, I'm only going to take 2 tiles just to make sure I can go first, get the tiles that I want. Then next time you get to select last. So the earlier you go in that turn order, the lower in the turn order for choosing the turn order in the next turn you go last in. So there's 2 turn order tracks if you think about it that way. And that's what makes this game really interesting.
The other thing we didn't say is at the point where you're actually deciding which pieces you're collecting, you're also taking a card that is going to give you either immediate points or immediate kind of scoring conditions or end of game conditions. But that also is the card that determines where on your board you can place those tiles. So that's another layer of
so
tension.
I might want to go first simply because the only place I can place tiles is in a particular corner of my board, and there's only one card that represents that corner. Yes, you're completely right. That is another amazing mechanic of this game because it again makes you think about turn order and the importance of that. So,
and if you get stuck with tiles that you can't place, then you lose favor. So you're penalized essentially.
So I really enjoyed this game. I'd like to play it more.
Same.
It's Electropolis. So keep an eye out for that one if you're in Taiwan.
All right.
The next one is a relatively new game that actually I had my number two. I had my eye on. It's called Vegetable Stock. And this is a game that came out recently and I couldn't find it anywhere. We went to so many board game stores, couldn't find it. So we went to one board game store and they offered to order it in. And so that was very exciting. Vegetable Stock is a little card game that, you know, some people might compare to something like Point Salad because it's a light, filler game, but it has this interesting twist. So it's very simple to teach. In this game, you are going to be putting cards out on the table that have different vegetables depicted on them, according to n+1, where n is the number of players. So the number of players plus 1 gets put down onto the table, and everybody in turn order is going to draft one of those cards. So you'll simply choose a card. Maybe I'll take the one that has 2 carrots and a tomato on it, and I'll draft that card, and the next player gets to choose from what's remaining. But what's interesting is there is a vegetable stock market, and the card that's left over is going to influence the market. And so, for example, if there's a card left over that has 2 eggplants and a broccoli on it, well, the eggplant value tracker is going to go up by 2, and the broccoli tracker is going to go up by 1. And so those 2 vegetables are going to go up in value, but the markets for those vegetables can also crash. So if it gets to the top of the market and then goes over 1 more, it's going to crash to 0, and all of a sudden the eggplant is worth nothing. And now at the end of the game, the cards that you've drafted are going to be multiplied out. So I've got 5 eggplant, but they're worth 0, so I get 0 for all of those eggplants in my hand. And so you're going to multiply them all out, and that's going to be your final score.
So everyone's vegetables are going to be multiplied by the same values. But obviously we all have been collecting and sort of investing in different types of vegetables.
And so you want to manipulate the market, because maybe I've noticed that Maggie tends to be collecting a lot of corn. Maggie's got probably a lot of the corn cards in there. And so I might want to force corn to crash, so that at the end of the game, Maggie's not going to surpass me by 1,000,000 points in carrot points. Really super simple game.
Very simple.
Super simple game. But it's just one of those fast, fun fillers, super easy to teach, like maybe even easier than point salad. I would say actually it's even simpler than point salad, except for the scoring at the end where there's a bit of multiplication, but
I'd say they're probably on par in terms of simplicity, because they're simple, like they're both simple, but they're kind of little complex bits in a different way.
But also, this one takes up a little less table space, and we actually played it a lot on the train, because all you need really is the stock. You need one line for the vegetable market, and then you really need 1 more line of the cards that you're going to be drafting from. Super simple. I know this game has got rave reviews from a lot of reviewers around the place, and I can see why. It's just like, it is what it is, and it's super easy and fast. I really don't like this box. It fell apart immediately.
And also, it's like, the cards are here, so then there's all of this wasted space that just makes the box be less...
It collapses into itself. I threw them, and they went everywhere in our hotel room, and then I was finding cards. Anyway, vegetable stock, our number 2, great little find if you can find it. Very simple game. Good one for a con. I might have that on me. Apparently I'm going to have a lot of these games on me at cons. And the number 1 game that we purchased in Taiwan was on the last day, buried in a pile of games. We had never heard of it before.
No.
Ever. A Taiwanese game called Pocket Master Builder.
Yes, so this is a little card game. It's really, really tiny. I feel like the BGG rating doesn't really... It's a very harsh rating for a game that ended up being our preferred number 1 pick. In this game, you are building... So you it's one of those games where you're using cards to create the table, to essentially lay out the table. So you're laying out cards at the top that are going to represent a wall. And then on the left and bottom side, you're also kind of creating, laying out tiles, which are like your starter buildings. So every card has lots of different elements in it. So on your turn, you're essentially going to play a card. So add to the kingdom in terms of buildings, and obviously that's going to be getting more and more populated over time, but you're going to be adding a card, and then you have the option of playing some of your workers, which are represented by little cubes, onto some of the spots of it where there's resources. So the way the resources work, though, is if they all have kind of colored edges. So if the resource color, or the background where the resources are, matches the adjacent card, then you get to take all of those resources. if they're the same matching color. If they're not matching colors, then you only get to take the resources on your card.
On the card you played.
So you can only ever get resources, or you can only put workers on the card that you're placing down, which is very, very limiting. But then, there's that sort of balance of like, oh, well, how many of them am I going to be able to get, or how many adjacencies am I going to be able to get? The other thing is there's a limit to the workers that you have available at any given point, because once you use your workers, they become exhausted, so they go to the rest area. And at the end of your and it's one of those games where any resources that you get to generate, you can only use on that turn. So you have to kind of create enough resources to then be able to afford or pay for one of the buildings or cards building cost. So all of the cards also have a building cost on them that you're trying to desperately reach with all the combo of resources. If you manage to build one of those cards, then you get to put one of your available worker tokens, commit them for life on top of that card, which is going to give you obviously points by the end of the game, and they usually will also trigger the ability on the card, which is either going to be a one-off immediate ability or an ongoing power that then you're going to have. For example, every time you build this type of building, you're going to get this other power.
And the special buildings that form the bottom row in the kingdom, they are going to give you end game scoring conditions
but
that
they're
are unique
harder
to you. But they're harder to build. But this game is really interesting because you are constantly trying to build up the amount of stuff that you can get done in a single turn by not only connecting the cards next to putting them in ideal locations where the colors match across the side, so you're generating more resources, but there's also this crown resource that allows you to exchange those kind of points for other things. For example, wild resources that are represented by gold, or
donkeys,
extra workers. And then there's a donkey kind of mechanic as well, where as you add to your donkey level or your number of donkeys, it allows you to exchange more cards, trash more cards out of your hand,
but also use more workers. Use more workers in any given turn.
And why are you trashing cards or using more workers? They can be exchanged for resources as well. And so therefore you can generate resources by placing your card, but then you're also using these other tools that are available to you and that get more powerful across the course of the game to also get more resources and therefore build more buildings. And the game will end when either player, in a 2-player game, where either player reaches 6 buildings built. Then there'll be one more turn, and then we will count up the victory points that are shown on the cards, as well as any end game scoring conditions. This game is tiny. Look at this box. It is called Pocket Master Builder, and everything that we've just spoken about is contained within a set of cards and some worker cubes. That's it is so crunchy. It is so Euro-like. It's very, very, very thinky. I had a lot of AP thinking about
it is quite AP-inducing.
It is AP-inducing. It is, as I think the reason why it is maybe has a slightly lower rating is, well, one, it hasn't had a lot of exposure, I expect. But the second thing is that it's deceptively challenging.
It's quite, there's a lot. There's so much, there's so many layers.
And the rulebook is terrible.
The rulebook,
terrible.
Rulebook is awful. It just awful in the sense that you kind of get the flow of it.
You get the gist of it.
But there's a lot of things that are not covered in it.
And then there's no iconography reference. But the lovely contributors to BGG, all of the community out there, have created some really handy reference guides. So if we didn't have that, would it be our number one? No. But because we were able to look it up and work out what some of the cards meant, then yes, but it just makes it a little bit harder to get into. But there's so much to like about this design. It is just really clever. And when you're playing it, you're like, oh, this is actually really smart.
It's one of those games where you start playing and you're like, I see. So it's one of those, you're not going to get the most of it in the first game or two. It's going to really reward understanding the intricacies of the things, the levers that you're pulling. Also, I haven't actually had a chance to play this solo. It only plays 1 to 2 players. We've only played it 2 players. I'm really looking forward to this. This is going to be an excellent solo game.
You are excited about that. And this is a game we'd never heard of. So Pocket Master Builder, we just stumbled upon it and then we played it and it was really great. Interestingly, our number 1 and our number 2, very heavy Euro game in a small box. box. That's Pocket Master Builder. Very simple, straightforward, easy to get to the table, filler.
And our number 13 was the biggest, most inconvenient one to travel with.
It really was.
So look,
little card games for the win in Taiwan. So we had a wonderful holiday in Taiwan, and if you do get the opportunity to go, there is a great board game scene there. So we hope you get to see it. We're going to share some more videos about our time over there, talk about a little bit more about the board gaming scene. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll be back with more board game content soon. But otherwise, bye for now. Bye.